happening? Oh, feels like my chest is going to burst.
My God! Wilhelm, do something!
Accept it. We're not getting out of here alive.
How can you say that? Alexander, you piece of shit! Let us out of here!
This is one of the many hub levels in the game, and this is a design concept that we started out with in Penumbra. The idea is to give the player some freedom on where to go, but at the same time give a clear objective. In this level, the slime obstacle is a thing that the player needs to get past, and all other levels then have things needed to do so. The slime itself is one of the few puzzles left from the initial designs, and the one I'm probably the least proud of. Now that slime appears all around, it feels a bit forced that you need to have a potion on the slime. Many testers also complained that they wanted other options in getting rid of the slime, like burning it. However, creating a potion is the central theme for this hub, so we had to let it be. I don't think it's that bad, but we probably could have redesigned it if we had time. This level was first called Distillery, and if you check the data file it's still named as such. Now for some reason I told Mickey, a writer, that it was called
It's dark in here.
Yes, and there's a good reason for it. But you can light the lamp now if you wish.
What's the reason? For the darkness, that is.
Stay close. Be careful not to stray.
What's the reason? Why is it so dark?
Pay attention, Daniel. It's important that you keep going straight and make sure not to stray.
This level was first called Distillery, and if you check the data file it's still named as such. Now for some reason I told Mickey, a writer, that it was called Refinery, and the voiceover was recorded with the wrong name. Since it's easier to change a name than a piece of voice data, we had to rename it. I'm glad I said Refinery though, and not King's Hall or Grandma's Vegetable Patch. That would not have been as fitting.
1839. It's been more than a month since my last entry. After the event inside the underground chamber in Algeria, Professor Herbert insisted I return to England. He said he didn't want to risk forfeiting the entire expedition lest I took a turn for the worse. An excessive decision, in retrospect. But I'm glad it turned out that way. I found my journal this morning in the haphazard collection of things brought home from Africa. Next to it lay the broken stone orb wrapped in cloth. I tried to assemble it, but couldn't. The pieces wouldn't fit together, as if they weren't from the same object. Could I have imagined it all? Was there ever a complete orb? Of June, 1839. I feel the need to continue this journal, even though it was intended for my journey to Africa. This must be something very important. I just know it. I've taken it upon myself to piece the orb back together, but it's been more difficult than one might think. The pieces are behaving strangely. They seem to change color, shape, and texture, but ever so slightly. Yesterday, I took careful measurements and notated any significant markings. Today, I confirmed my suspicions. They were changing. I was terrified and rushed off to see the finest geologist in London, Sir William Smith. I approached the subject with care, and we discussed how rocks change form. He told me about the nature of glass, how it eventually collapses on itself, like ice slowly melting over the course of centuries. Smith eased my mind a bit, but I can't escape the feeling that these shards have otherworldly properties.
The end puzzle with the crank and pulley contraption was a tricky puzzle, not to create or on a technical level, but purely on a noticeable level. We added stuff to the puzzle perhaps 4 or 5 times because after each test session we kept having testers that did not see the piece of wood that you are to break to complete the puzzle. Originally you could only break it, so we added the option to pull it out as well. Then we added a faint light to draw the attention to it, and also tweaked the description of the crank. After that we added so that when you pull the crank there is a bit of dust falling from the piece of wood, and we also did a slight change in the angle of the piece of wood, and changed the color and the texture, all to make it as notable as possible. So, the question is, did you notice the piece of wood?
Hello, I'm Mikko Tarmia, the composer from Amnesia The Dark Descent. You may have heard my music before if you played the Penumbra game series, and I did a couple of tracks for Penumbra Tech Demo too. So this is my 5th project with Frictional Games, and I'm happy to be a part of the team. The Guardian monster has its own musical theme, which you can hear in many situations in the game, even if the Guardian is not physically present. Actually, it's more like a noise sound than a certain melody, and I played it with my bassoon. The theme has many forms, and this one is almost a direct sound coming from the instrument. And this noise, which sounds like screaming, is a highly modified version of it.
creature in the water, affectionately called Lurky here at Fictional Games, did not have a sense of sound. Later on we wanted to add it though, so the player could lure it away by throwing stuff in the water. When I added this, something unexpected happened. Lurky started following me. When you jump on the crate, it hears the sound you make when you land and it goes there to investigate. This was very fun emergent behavior, and I think it made him even more menacing. I also want to add that Lurker was kind of inspired by my favorite movie as a child, Tremors. I guess this early obsession might also explain some creatures in our older games.
Hi, I am Tapio, and I made monster sounds and vision sounds for this game. Yeah, I just love this monster. I think it was pretty fun to make because there was underwater sounds as well as sounds from the above. I think I wanted it to sound like a very big monster, but still very fast. And I thought that voice itself needed to be high-pitched screaming because water is splashing around and messing other sounds. Actually, a great example is the attack sound where there is big water splash as it jumps from the water. At the same time, you can hear a short scream sound which is made from the cat sounds. I think it works great. I think other great sound is when it's just eating in the level. You can hear it eating meat and hear the bones crashing under the water. I made the eating sounds by walking in the water and breaking dry wooden sticks. The sound itself didn't need much processing or editing because it sounded almost like you hear now. Well, this is Water Monster, so I recorded lots of water sounds. For example, bubble sounds are made with a watering can, which is sunk in the water. And when it's chasing the player, its movement is made by a big rock, which I just threw in the lake. It feels like it's running after you or hitting its big hands on the water. I think there is lots of power in this monster.
This level is the high point of the lurker build-up, which sort of started in an entrance level with the slime appearing. It's supposed to be a sort of roller coaster ride and is designed to be easy enough to be completed on the first try. Yet, it should also be stressful. Many of the things in a level that seems like you barely make it are just scripted to be that way. But it's nothing you notice because they're blended in with the truly deadly stuff. This is the second hub level of the game, and is supposed to give some contrast to the stressful lurker encounter. We think building up contrast like this is extremely important for the horror movie. Only by seeing a bright level can you appreciate the dark one, and so on. If you do not do this, the player will get used to the stuff and the effect will lessen greatly.
In the original pitch, Herbert was a fairly important character, but it didn't really reflect in the games, so we tried a few different things to incorporate him, but it never really made any sense. Herbert was important to Daniel's background, but in the end he didn't have any impact on the story happening right now, that is, the conflict between Daniel and Alexander. So most of his things was cut during the last stage of production.
An ascending room. Would it take us to the inner sanctum?
It will definitely take care of the vertical part of our journey. So, you have ridden an elevator before?
Yes, the Colosseum at Regent's Park has one. It takes you to the gallery where you can view the panorama.
Good. This ride might be a little longer, and in the other direction.
When I first started working on the elevator, I had detailed concept art as base for my work. This is both a blessing and a curse. Concept art saves a lot of time for us artists, as we just have to copy what we see in the picture, but it also takes away some fun parts of our work, as we don't have to design anything ourselves. In this case, the concept art was very detailed and there wasn't much to change. However, I noticed that the roof part on the concept was dark and dull, so that's where I could add details of my own. I added the patterns to fill out the empty space. I wanted them to fit with the eastern feel of the elevator and took inspiration from Arabic windows. In the end, it's not a very big addition, but it adds to the overall impression of the elevator as something exotic that doesn't really fit in with the blue-grey stones of Brandenburg.
This map was one of the most fun to make because of the rooms have more objects than we usually add in the levels. I think the first 2 rooms was pretty good, just because of this. But we can't add this many objects in every room in the game, because that would, first of all, be very demanding on your PC's performance, and a lot of our players doesn't have gaming rigs. Secondly, it wouldn't make sense if every room or corridor was a storage. We also try very hard to vary the levels and rooms as much as we can do. This level was also the first time in the game the player had any contact with the outside. So for this part I had to make a couple of different wall pieces, a pine tree and a breakable version of the window. And I can talk a little bit more about the breakable window here. When creating breakable objects like this, we have to first of all break the model by splitting parts up and creating pieces. Like on this window, it has a lot of wood parts that are loose after it breaks. Those parts are remodeled into broken versions, and in the broken version of the window they're actually hanging in the air at the same place they were when the window was whole. After modeling those and exporting the model into collada format, which our engine handles, I use our in-house model editor to set each wood part up with a body for collision, and I also had to wait for it to behave realistically. I also add material type, in this case wood, and that is so that wood sound is played when the beats hit something. You can also set up more advanced stuff like how it will behave in water, how fast it can travel, and how fast the speed will decay, but also a lot of other settings as well. But when that broken version is done, I also set up a special entity of the original window where I set it to break at a certain force, and when that happens another entity will load and this one will disappear. And in this case we load the broken version of the window. We also set it up so a particle system with glass shards is going to be played as well as a break sound. And as soon as you break that window, and all that is happening, and since you probably threw something at the window, the force of that object will make the wood pieces fly, not fall straight to the ground as they would otherwise. That is pretty much how we do it with most breakable entities, but of course creating a particle system and sounds for this is needed too. And in this level you can also see a lot of props that I made earlier, before we started making maps. This is objects like shelves, tables, chairs, paintings, etc. But of course I didn't make all the objects in this level.
Let's see what you have to offer. What a mess. I should have sharpened the saw, but I can sense it. It's definitely there.
The decision to have the player go outside in this map started out as a quick and dirty idea for some sort of puzzle. However, it turned out very nicely, and to see the trees really gives a feeling of being in a castle and not just on some set. The first idea was not even to have the player break the window and just have it open directly instead. But when we added it, we felt it gave a really nice feel and reward for finishing the puzzle. In retrospect, we should have had more moments when the player ventures outside, and it gives this feel of being a part of a larger world.
journal is gone. What would they want with my journal? So cold.
Daniel is a pretty complicated character to write for, as we didn't want the player to feel that they were losing control by having feelings imposed on them. After the amnesia kicks in, everything which is Daniel is essentially gone. The player is the new Daniel, and he should be able to act the way he pleases, and even reject his own background as he discovers it. That is why everything concerning Daniel is flashbacks. Even the diary entries are read as what is being told is happening right now. That is, it is the old Daniel telling the story, and not the player reading it.
In this room, everything is connected to destruction and home. This was Daniel's home as Alexander's guest, and the diary entries are about Daniel being home in London and things falling apart. These sort of connections are not something that we want the player to get, but rather it should end up in the subconscious and work toward building the mood. Also worth noting is this focus, as explained in the commentary of Winecellar, where we want the player's attention on a certain aspect. We hope this makes the story clearer. The idea is to slowly build it up, one part at a time, giving the player time to digest and think about it.
2nd of July, 1839. I received a letter today from the Algerian governor's office disclosing the fate of Herbert's expedition. About a week after my departure, Abdullah, one of the men traveling with us, returned from the desert. He was badly injured, as if maimed by a lion. The man rambled deliriously about the expedition being attacked by something horrible. The French quickly dispatched a search party to look for the expedition. After searching for days, they found the camp abandoned without any trace of Herbert or his men. Tomorrow, I'll retrieve the things they recovered from Herbert's tent at the customs house. I don't know what to make of it, but I'm worried for him.
If you listen to the music tracks more carefully, you may find that characters have their own musical themes, which can usually be heard when you read papers during the game. These themes appear in many variations, so it's not always so easy to recognize them immediately. And in the end of the game, some of these themes will go quite insane. Oh, and that's Daniel's theme, which you can hear in the game's menu screen. Let me play it to you with piano.
3rd of July, 1839. Today I picked up Herbert's things at the customs house. I dug through the trove of documents he had carried and found a log detailing the expedition. The nature of this text ranged from quick notes to colourful accounts of transpired events. I skimmed the pages, trying to figure out what might have happened. May 17th, the day I was trapped inside the orb chamber, Herbert dryly states, "Recovered Daniel after 1 hour of entrapment." This confused me greatly. I was suffocating within minutes. How could I have lasted an hour? I continued reading the peculiar text. Herbert states his facts without judgment or passion, but suddenly I could read frustration into his text. He pushed his men to investigate the underground tomb, an effort which seems to have strained the minds of his men. Madness spread through the ranks, and Herbert had to take some extreme measures to continue. He finally visits the chamber himself, where he retrieves the orb to the surface. His account confuses me greatly. If he has the orb, what are those pieces in my drawing room? July 1839. It's done! The orb is assembled. I was awakened by an exhausting nightmare. Shaking and sweating, I retired to the drawing room with a cup of tea. The relic pieces lay spread across the table as I'd left them, but somehow I knew how it was supposed to be. I fetched the tar, which I had prepared to fix the pieces together, and without fault I joined them, producing the orb I remembered so clearly. The tar proved unnecessary. It was pushed out from the joining pieces as they merged on their own, with no adhesive. The ancient stone relic now rests on my table. Its immaculate surface and perfect shape could have been molded by a factory. This is all too strange.